All right, so today we are diving into Spanish accent marks, and you sent over some fascinating material for this deep dive,
Hmm.
including this trick about shouting words as if you've lost a dog. I have to admit, I don't quite see how that helps with accent marks.
Well, you see, it all comes down to understanding the rhythm of the language.
Okay.
Spanish has this really clear stress pattern, and knowing where that stress falls is like the key to knowing when you need to use an accent mark.
So is that what this whole lost dog thing is about? It's about like finding that stressed syllable?
Yeah, exactly.
Huh.
It's kind of a fun way to tap into like your natural pronunciation instincts.
I like it.
Yeah, think about it. When you're calling out for a lost dog, like you naturally emphasize the most important part of its name.
Right.
And in Spanish, that same emphasis, that strong syllable, is the key to like the whole accent system.
Okay, I'm willing to try it out. Let's say I'm looking at the word balón, which means ball in Spanish.
Okay.
So I'm picturing my dog Balón has wandered off, and I probably shout balón, putting the emphasis on that last syllable.
See, you did it naturally. You instinctively stressed the loan,
Yeah.
which is the stressed syllable in Spanish, the
Yeah.
sílaba fuerte. And because that stressed syllable is at the end of the word and the word ends in an N, it needs an accent mark.
So it's not just about finding the stressed syllable. It's also about where that syllable falls in the word
Right.
and what the word ends in.
That's right. It's a combination of things.
Oh, okay.
Um, let's try another one. How about the word for backpack? Mochila.
Okay, mochila. So picturing my lost backpack, I'd call out mochila, definitely stressing CHI there.
Perfect. You found the stressed syllable again.
All right.
And this time, because that stressed syllable is the second to last syllable and mochila ends in a vowel, it doesn't need an accent mark.
Hold on, I think I'm seeing a pattern here. So the rules depend on both the stressed syllable ND, whether the word ends in a vowel, an N or an NS.
Uh-huh.
What if a word ends in some other consonant, though?
You're catching on quick. You've identified the two key elements there.
I think-
Spanish words that end in a vowel, lis or met s, have one set of rules for accent marks.
Okay.
And those ending in other consonants have a different set of rules.
Interesting. So I'm starting to see the logic in this whole system. It's not random at all, is it?
Not at all. It's really designed for consistency and predictability in pronunciation.
Okay.
So let's take a closer look at these rules, starting with words that end in a vowel, most n or mas s,
Okay.
like our examples, balón and mochila.
All right, let's unpack these rules. It seems like finding that stressed syllable is step one every time. What's next?
Well, if a word ends in a vowel, an n or ns, and the stress falls on the second to last syllable, like in mochila,
Yeah.
it doesn't need an accent mark.
Okay.
That's considered the natural stress pattern for those types of words.
Okay, but if the stress falls on the last syllable, like balón, or on any syllable before the second to last, then it needs an accent mark.
You got the accent mark is there to signal that the stress is like somewhere unexpected based on those word endings.
Wow.
It's like a little flag saying, hey, pay attention to the pronunciation here.
That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
So what about words that end in other consonants then? What are the rules for those?
It's actually very similar.
Okay.
If the stress is on the last syllable, no accent mark is needed.
Okay.
But if the stress falls on any other syllable, an accent mark is required.
Interesting.
It's all about maintaining consistency.
Okay, so give me an example of a word that ends in a consonant other than NN or S.
How about the word arbol, meaning tree?
Okay, arbol. The stress is definitely on the first syllable R,
Hmm.
and it doesn't end in a vowel R and S. So based on what we've talked about, it needs an accent mark, right?
You are on a roll. You've successfully applied the rule
Whoa.
for words ending in consonants other than N or RS.
Nice.
Yeah, the accent mark on arbol is there to make sure that we pronounce it correctly,
Okay.
with the emphasis on the first syllable.
You know, for years I just thought accent marks were random, but this makes so much sense.
It's a common misconception.
Yeah.
But once you understand the logic behind it, they become much easier to work with.
Yeah, definitely. So to summarize, the first step is always to find that stressed syllable,
Right.
maybe by shouting it like I lost my dog.
Mm-hmm.
Then check the word ending.
Yeah.
If it ends in a vowel, N or mass S, and the stress is on the second to last syllable, no accent needed.
Right.
Any other syllable accent mark?
No.
Same goes for words ending in other consonants. Last syllable stress, no accent, any other syllable gets the accent mark.
Exactly. You've perfectly distilled the core rules of Spanish accentuation.
I'm feeling pretty good about this.
Yeah.
This is way less intimidating than I thought it would be.
Good.
Are there any exceptions to these rules, though? I feel like there always are with languages.
Of course. But even the exceptions often have their own internal logic.
Okay, good, because I was starting to think this was too easy.
Yeah.
Let's talk about those exceptions. I'm ready for a challenge.
All right, let's do it. Well, one common exception is when you use accent marks to distinguish between words that are spelled the same but have different meanings.
Oh, right. Like, L for thee and L for he. Those little accent marks are doing a lot of work there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, without the accent, you wouldn't know if you were talking about like a definite article or a masculine pronoun.
Right.
The accent mark just removes any ambiguity.
So it's not even just about the pronunciation, then it's also about preventing mix-ups.
Yeah.
With the meaning.
Uh-huh.
That's fascinating. I bet those aren't the only exceptions, though, right? What about those words that just seem to, like, break all the rules?
Ah, yes. The
Yeah.
rule breakers.
Yeah.
I mean, they exist in every language, and often they're remnants of older pronunciation patterns or, influences from other languages.
Okay.
You kind of just have to memorize those.
Yeah.
But thankfully, there aren't too many of them.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better. It's like those tricky irregular verbs.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just gotta accept them and move on. But it's good to know that most Spanish words follow those consistent rules that we talked about earlier.
Absolutely. Those rules are your foundation.
Okay.
And once you have those down, you can start tackling the exceptions with more confidence.
Speaking of other things to tackle, you mentioned that tildes are also accent marks.
Yes,
I'm still a little fuzzy on those. Are they just a fancy way to write an N?
they are definitely more than just fancy NS.
Okay.
A tilde over an N indicates a completely different sound. It's called a palatal nasal.
Okay, palatal nasal. That sounds kind of intimidating. Can you break that down for me a little bit?
Sure. So think about how you would normally pronounce the N sound.
Yeah.
With a tilde, you're adding a slight Y sound after the N.
Okay.
It's subtle, but it's important for pronunciation.
A Y sound. So it's almost like the N is doing a little dance with the Y.
That's a great way to put it. It's a subtle blending of those two sounds.
I like it.
Think about the word año, meaning year. You don't pronounce it enyo,
Right.
but rather año, almost like one flowing sound.
Oh, I hear it. It's like the tilde is telling you to just smoothly glide through that N sound.
Uh-huh.
Are there any rules for when to use a tilde?
The most common rule is that a tilde is used when an N comes before a vowel,
Okay.
like in año or señal, meaning signal.
So it's not just random, there's a pattern.
Right.
This is making so much more sense than when I tried to learn this in school.
Context is everything.
Yeah.
And by understanding the logic, you're kind of creating this framework for yourself,
Right.
making it easier to absorb the new information.
It's like solving a puzzle.
Yeah.
You start with the edges and work your way in. So we've covered the basic rules for accent marks based on stress and word endings. We've touched on some of those tricky exceptions, and we've explored the world of the palatal nasal,
Yes.
indicated by the tilde. Is there anything else we need to know about these fascinating little marks?
Well, I think it's important to emphasize that mastering Spanish accent marks, like any aspect of language learning, takes time and practice.
Yeah, that's true for anything worth learning, right? You don't become a concert pianist overnight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the more you expose yourself to language, the more you read, listen, and speak, the more intuitive these patterns will become.
Right.
You'll start to see accent marks not as obstacles, but as helpful guides to pronunciation and meaning.
I like that perspective. They're not there to trip us up, but to help us navigate the language more effectively.
Exactly.
So what's the best way to practice? Should I just start yelling out random Spanish words like, I've lost my dog, I'm picturing some strange looks from my neighbors?
Well, while the lost dog trick is fun for identifying stressed syllables,
Yeah.
there are other, perhaps less disruptive ways to practice.
Okay.
Reading Spanish texts aloud, paying attention to the accent marks and how they influence pronunciation is a great way to kind of train your ear and your tongue.
Okay.
You can also listen to audiobooks or podcasts in Spanish focusing on how native speakers pronounce words with accent marks. And of course, speaking with native speakers whenever possible is the best way to truly immerse yourself in the language and really internalize its nuances.
You know what's really cool is that understanding these accent rules makes me feel like I'm cracking the code of the Spanish language. It's not just memorization, it's about understanding a system.
And that understanding is what makes language learning truly rewarding.
Yeah.
It's about connecting with the culture on a deeper level,
Right.
appreciating the beauty and logic of its structure.
Yeah. It's like learning the steps to a dance. Once you understand the basic footwork, you can start adding your own style and flair.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And just like with dance fluency in Spanish comes with practice and immersion.
Well, thanks to this deep dive, I feel like I've taken a huge step forward in understanding how accent marks work in Spanish. I'm starting to see those little marks not as my enemies, but as my friends, guiding me towards better pronunciation and a deeper understanding of the language.
And remember, what we've explored today is just the tip of the iceberg. Spanish, like any language, is full of nuances and complexity.
Right, but that's what keeps it interesting, right? It's a journey, not a destination.
Exactly. And with each new discovery, you'll find yourself connecting with the language and the culture on like a more profound level.
So to our listener, I encourage you to embrace those accent marks. Don't shy away from them. Try out the lost dog trick. Read Spanish texts aloud. Listen to native speakers, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's all part of the learning process.
And as you continue your Spanish language journey, I'd like to leave you with a thought-provoking question.
Okay.
Do you think this emphasis on stress and clear pronunciation is unique to Spanish? Or could there be similar patterns in other languages? Perhaps there are hidden systems waiting to be discovered, making language learning more accessible and enjoyable.
That's a great question to ponder. It reminds us that language learning is a constant exploration full of surprises and insights. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Spanish accent marks. Who knew those little marks could be so fascinating?